Greetings, commanders, and welcome on in to our part two, actually, of our narrative roundtable. Focusing, I guess you could say, focusing on the Azimuth saga, but I guess today is actually going to be more around just the current narrative and things that are happening in the world of Elite Dangerous. So there's a lot to look forward to today. So I'm not going to spend too much time in this little intro. I want to get straight to our guests and straight to who we have with us today. So obviously, in the top right of your screens, we've got Mr. Bruce Garrido. How are you doing, Bruce?
07 Commanders. I'm doing very well, Zach. Very much looking forward to the conversation we're about to, I was about to say have, but really more for us to listen to while the experts actually discuss everything. But no, it should be a really good one.
That's more likely. Yeah, we've got quite a lot of people in chat, actually. I'll say hello. We've got Stuart GT 07. We've got Bograt 07. Osric on YouTube, hello. Who else have we got? Tobley 07. Dog in Space, great name, 07. Lots of people. Yeah, so welcome on in, everybody. If you haven't caught one of these streams before, it's basically a hour-long chat where we dive into the lore of Elite Dangerous, and we get a bit tinfoily, as some might say, which is exactly what we want here on these streams. So, as always, feel free to chime in with your own theories and opinions, chat, and if me and Bruce spot something, we will obviously pass it along to our guests here. But speaking of guests, let's introduce the first one of them. So in the middle of your screens, we've got today Grinning Crow. How are you doing today, Crow?
Great. How are you all doing?
We're all good. We're excited, I think. I guess, Crow, for anyone who didn't catch you on the first narrative stream or isn't aware of your channel, what is your channel about? Where can people find you?
I'm Grinning Crow. I'm a space and science fiction streamer. I focus mostly on Elite Dangerous. Inside Elite, we do lore, roleplay, and exploration. I talk about the narrative and how the narrative's designed. I make predictions that are often creepily accurate about where the story is going. So yeah, definitely, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, stop on by.
Nice. Okay, and also we've got two guests from Galnet News Digest. So we'll start with Commander Wotherspoon. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Commander Wotherspoon, one half of Galnet News Digest. We have a mug sometimes. We do YouTube and podcasts. So there's Galnet News Digest on YouTube and Galnet News Digest as a podcast and on Spotify and so on. And it's basically interpreting the news that we get from Galnet and also some of the other stories that we get in game, and trying to present them in a slightly different light so that we see a different angle on the same stories to the way it's officially presented. And we try and do it on a really sort of up-to-date sort of rolling kind of news sort of format, so that as soon as a new Galnet story comes out, about an hour later, we'll try and issue an update which covers that story and tries to explain what's going on with it.
That's very efficient. And so we've also got BeetleJude from Galnet News Digest. How are you doing this evening, BeetleJude?
I'm all right. Hello. I am the weak link in the Galnet News team.
That's not true.
No, I read out what Commander Wotherspoon writes.
Yeah, I mean that might be true, but you also let's not play down your knowledge of the things that are going on in the game as well.
Oh yeah, because I whenever something interesting happens, we'll probably both go there, and I will leap around.
Well, I mean, you're there, you're finding things out.
Stuff. Yeah, exactly, and it's great listening to the logs and seeing the sites, and yeah, no, it's just a nice way to play the game, really.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in chat that are fans of both Grinning Crow and Galnet News Digest. If you're on Twitch, you can put !guests in the chat. And that will give you a link to each of the channels of our guests today. If you're on YouTube, obviously head over to Twitch /Grinning_Crow for Grinning Crow. I believe that's still the case, right, Crow?
Correct. I have not actually renamed my channel to Grinning Cow.
Nice.
Despite many people misreading it.
And obviously, if you're on YouTube, if you just give a search to Galnet News Digest in the top search bar, you will find them there. Okay then, Bruce. Is there anything that you want to bring up before we get on with today's events?
I reckon we'd best just get right into it, because if the last one is anything to go by, we're going to run out of time and wish we'd spoken about more topics. But that's not so bad, because we can always keep this series going and dive into the other things as we go. If I were to add one thing, it's to say I really love what the Galnet News Digest does, because the official story is not necessarily the only story. That's always something worth bearing in mind. There's lots of different angles and lenses that you can look at the events through. So something to bear in mind, perhaps as we go on through the discussion that we're about to have.
Interesting. Nice little tidbit from Bruce there to start off the discussion. Chat, keep that in your mind as we talk about today's subject. So the plan is today, chat, we're going to give a quick recap on Aegis and Salvation, just in case this is your first time hearing about this kind of thing, just as a sort of set the foundation of who these people are. Then we're going to talk about the Far God cult, and then we're going to talk about Hyford's cache. We've got some other things lined up in case we run out of we somehow get through those things fast, but we're not really expecting to. So we'll see where we end up, chat. But that's the sort of initial run of play. So to get us started, I guess I'll pass over to BeetleJude. BeetleJude, can you give us? I guess first we'll start with Aegis. They've been around longer. For someone who's potentially new to Elite Dangerous or new to the lore, can you give us a quick overview of who Aegis are? What's Aegis involved with?
Okay, so when the Thargoids started appearing, and when the traces of Thargoids started appearing, the Federation, the Empire, and the Alliance decided to get together in a spirit of we're in it togetherness, and they formed Aegis, which is a research organisation, which is now a defence and research organisation, and basically geared towards finding out about the Thargoids and ideally protecting ourselves against them. So it's based at the start in the Pleiades sector, and still a chunk of it. Well, and a chunk of it's based in Delphi, at a station called Donar's Oak, and they've got that's the research facility that's there. There's Aegis Core and Aegis Defence, and Aegis Defence is a little bit more roving. They're just sort of the mega ships that go round. And they basically started out quite well. They got the engineers on it. Engineers created a bunch of AX weapons. They thought, well, we're doing quite well. AX weapons were reasonably successful against the Thargoids, and they found out created a Xeno scanner to find out a little bit more. They got Ramtar on the case as well. Ramtar was happy to pass over the information that he had researched in his travels to the Guardian sites, when we discovered about the Guardians. And then middle of last year-ish, the NMLA cropped up and started causing problems for the Empire, and the Empire and the Federation weren't getting on very well. So Empire decided to withdraw their funding from Aegis, and then things started to go belly up, and lots more of the funding started to be withdrawn from Aegis, and nothing much. They didn't really have anything new to offer at that point. And this is not a whistle stop tour, is it?
That's fine.
Sorry.
No, it's good.
It's
good.
good.
Skip to the end. Anyway, Aegis cash strapped, a little bit incompetent. Everything goes wrong. They try and rally the forces. Yes, bring us loads of Guardian artifacts. We'll pile them up in Delphi. We'll put them on a mega ship, and try and create some new mega weapons. And unfortunately, the Thargoids noticed and started bombing Delphi. So they pegged it out of Delphi on the mega ship, and then they stopped halfway. They decided, well, we'll go to Sol, which is about 350 light years away from Delphi, and then they stopped halfway because they might not have enough tritium, and anyway. So, and when they get there, they get to this system about halfway to Sol. The Thargoids land on them, and boom. And bad stuff happens, and then the Federation says, "Oh, you're not bringing that here," and so they, then they decide to find a different system. Yeah,
Sorry.
Sorry, I may have.
No, keep going.
I rolled off message somewhat. Anyway, so they decide to go somewhere else with numbers in the title, and I can't remember. And then they never got there, and we don't know where they are.
Yeah, and the suspicion is that the Thargoids took them, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case. I'm pretty sure Salvation got the ship.
The Alexandria, full of 400,000 tons worth of Guardian artifacts.
I mean, where are you going to get all those Guardian artifacts that you need to build a super weapon? I mean, that's what you were doing in the CG if you were doing stuff for Salvation, right? Salvation lost. He just wins. He just makes off with their goods. Salvation says, you know what? I've got the means and the know-how to do this. Let's steal the ship.
But
then shows up with a super weapon a little while later.
But then Salvation did win the second CG, which
Right.
was also to gather Guardian weapons from the Proteus sites. So there is still it's Orion mining, isn't it? Or Taurus mining, megaship, which is still full of loads of Guardian stuff, which belongs to Salvation. He may
Right.
also have the Archimedes, but he's certainly got 400,000 tons of his own Guardian stuff too.
Right, but we needed more than one weapon.
That's a lot of tons. But yes. Okay, so in terms of Aegis, the kind of key people are Admiral Aidan Tanner from the Federation, and what's the name of the research?
Albert Ezra.
Albert Ezra, thank you. Yes, who has now
The one who was
resigned.
working on the communication device, right?
Yes, who wanted to talk to the Thargoids. That's right.
She was head of research, wasn't she?
That's right, and the original reason, as you were saying, for Aegis was to research the Thargoids, but about 6 months later, the defence part was set up, and that's Aidan Tanner's bit, and he's still working on it, and there's still loads of megaships in the field in the Pleiades and in the Witchhead Nebula, but kind of like Aegis is kind of a bit sort of stalled at the moment, which is
cut all their government government right?
Yeah, the only person who still wants, or the only person who still seems to want Aegis, is Edmund Mahan, isn't it, of the Alliance? He's desperate.
Yeah, I can't imagine why.
Well, he wants to get the Sirius Treaty signed and get everybody behind that. So that's Aegis.
Yeah.
How
So
about Salvation?
yeah, Jude,
Hmm.
we could probably talk about that subject alone. There was meant to be a quick summary for the next hour. So let's talk about Salvation. Jude, do you want to give us a quick rundown of Salvation, because we've mentioned them a few times already in the past few minutes. Anyone who's new to the lore, who is Salvation? That's a big question. Who is Salvation?
Well, we're not sure. When the Adamaster turned up in Chukchan, which was a ghost ship, he appeared. There was lots of hoo-ha about it, and not that long afterwards, Salvation turned up near it and started offering, I can't remember what I'm talking about. I've forgotten. Well, anyway, we had a CG and everyone did stuff. I can't remember what I'm talking about now.
Yeah, they were offering rewards, right? So Salvation was offering rewards for people that went to find the Hesperus. And then they would then be able to give in data that, because when they found the Hesperus, they also discovered the Scrivener's clan dredger right next to it, right? And so Salvation was interested in the data from here, and then you could hand that data into the Taurus mining venture, I believe, and then you would be rewarded with credits for that.
Yeah, the Scriveners, the ones that triggered the Hesperus, because the Hesperus, when they started pulling off the data from the Hesperus, it sent a distress beacon to the Admaster, didn't it? Not the Admaster. No, it was the Admaster.
Yeah, it was the Admaster.
Yeah.
And that's how we found out about the whereabouts of the Hesperus, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But
That's
anyway,
right.
so we're not really sure who he is, but everyone seems to think he's great anyway.
Yeah.
Also,
So
gives him a lot of Guardian artifacts.
why is it that people think he's great? What has Salvation been doing to make people believe that?
He's been telling everyone that he's the saviour of humanity and that he will produce weapons which will destroy Thargoids.
Mm-hmm.
And he's new and exciting.
Yeah.
He gives the players the one thing that we seem to care about: guns.
Yeah, that's very true. And he's something new and interesting and exciting. And the Pilots Federation is telling us not to trust him. And of course we think, hey, this is the underdog. We're going to trust this guy now. And he's definitely nothing to do with any of the stuff that happened at Hyford's cache. Definitely not. Well, perhaps he is.
But we'll talk about that later. Chat have got a few. Chat are saying that Salvation is a ship, says Happy Monkey. And a lot of people always say that Salvation is Guardian, he's AI, etc., etc. I mean, there's a lot of different theories going around at the minute in terms of who or what Salvation actually is.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting ones.
Yeah, he is at the moment an incredibly mysterious character. He says he's a scientist, and he says that he wants to save humanity. It appears that what he wants to save humanity from is the Thargoids, circumstantially, because what he's doing is he's building anti-Thargoid weaponry at the moment. Whether or not at some point in the future he's going to turn that anti-Thargoid weaponry on the rest of humanity, well, we need to wait and find out. But he is offering nice rewards to folks. So if you go and find out about the Proteus, we'll give you some void opals. If you kind of do this CG to gather all the Guardian stuff from the Proteus site, which is the Guardian Thargoid battle site, the ancient battle site, then I'll give you a wonderful new weapon, and we've got new weapons. I believe there's a new weapon for sale at the moment in the Merope system on the Bright.
It's a plasma caster. It's actually really good too. I don't do AX, but every AX pilot I know who's just played with it is like, this is a really, really good gun.
So he's giving us the stuff we want, definitely, as you were saying, Crow. But yeah, I mean, can you possibly trust someone that you don't know who he is or what he's really trying to do? It does worry me a lot that we might be sort of playing along with this guy. We might be believing him, and it might actually all turn out for the worse in the long run.
We do have evidence that Aegis is officially on our side. They've produced an awful lot of AX weapons and Guardian hybrid weapons, which have helped us. And we've not got that information about Salvation.
Could you not say the same? I mean, he is providing weapons that the anti-Xeno, commanders are finding useful.
It's interesting that you keep using he as a pronoun. It's kind of telling.
Well, you said this last time.
Yes, I did. I want to bring it up again.
There are a couple of Galnet articles that refer to him as he.
Right. We've never heard Salvation speak. No. Personally, I think that Salvation is either in league with or at the same aims as Azimuth. Right. Maybe from a different end. Their focus being on Guardian technology and Guardian weapons. We've seen this kind of parallel happen a few times in Elite Dangerous stories. When you had getting into something we'll talk about later, the Fire God Cult and the Church of the Eternal Void, right? These two different religions that worship two different alien species. But yeah, my thought has always been that Salvation either works with or is very aware of Azimuth. So if he's not Azimuth, then it's possible Pharmasapien, if it isn't actually a cover organization and a real rival, maybe Pharmasapien was more interested in Guardian technology. Yeah,
perhaps. We may well get onto that when we discuss Hyford's cache a bit later on. But I guess we need to go.
Let's move on because again, another thing, Bruce, we could talk about Salvation and stuff all day, but we have our plan, Bruce. We should stick to it, right? To some extent.
Yes, definitely. There are lots of interesting quirks about the Salvation character that we could go into. Quickly, while it's fresh, though, we did just mention the weapons that are uniquely available from the megaship that Salvation is sort of what's the word I'm looking for, associated with. So it's worth mentioning now, actually, this is not really a sort of a fourth wall breaking moment, but from a gameplay perspective, if anyone were trusting enough of Salvation, or even if they weren't and still wanted to throw their lot in just to get the weapons, those will be available at that discount until the 11th, which is a week from now. So just as a little notification for everyone. But yes, we should move on.
Yeah, that's in the Merope system, right, at the minute?
Yes, that's right. You're looking for the Bright Sentinel megaship where there's a tech broker in the Merope system.
Cool, right. Yeah,
if that interests you, of course.
Of course.
Which it may not do.
Right, let's move on then. So, it's time to dive into the first of our bigger topics. We're 25 minutes into the show. We're going to dive into the first of our bigger topics, which is the Fire God cult. So, this is one of the aspects of the narrative that actually interests me a lot, especially before I joined and I was learning about the game. So we're gonna hand over to Crow to give us I guess whatever you feel best, Crow. Talk us through the Fire God cult. Who are they?
So-
Someone who's new to this. Explain.
Yeah, I what I originally was going to do is I was going to go through kind of the sequence of events of the Far God cult being revealed to us, like how that story went and what we learned about the Far God cult. But in the interest of time, because I can spend easily an hour just doing that, let's just talk very high level about the Far God cult. So the Far God cult is a group within the bubble. They worship Thargoids. They believe that they are, what is the phrasing? Dark angels who will be the herald of the Far God. The Far God will descend from another dimension and wipe out humanity, and only the true believers, only the members of the they call themselves the Order of the Far God. Well, one group called themselves the Order of the Far God will be saved. What's really interesting in their story, the story first starts on like 19 May 3304, and then it goes all the way down to March of 3305, and it stops. And we only recently see the story happen again here in 3307 in July and August. Is that before they show back up, they are described as disorganized. They are described as being like isolationists. They're described as having like radically different ideologies, even within the same hive chapels. There were members who believed that they personally were the only person who would survive the Far God's wrath and be allowed to continue on. One of the other things that's really interesting in the 3304 narrative is that they're like incredibly pacifists. They don't interact with anybody. They do not respond to violence, and violence is done on them often. Their churches are burned, and it's noted in several Galnet articles. They do not even leave burning buildings, kind of thing. They're just like incredibly pacifistic nihilists. It's a very interesting story. I would love to cover more of it. I actually did on Tuesday. But the other part that's really interesting with it is a very strong response from the Federation in regards to this, where somebody who wanted to be a congressperson decided to run this very like McCarthyism style response to them, pushing further and further for violence against these Thargoid spies, these Thargoid worshippers, suggesting this fifth column element that they're being like seeded back into the bubble to foment dissent and wait for the Far God to show up and cause harm. And it just kind of keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and getting worse and worse. And eventually the FIA gets involved, which is the Federal Intelligence Agency. And they start arresting people and rounding them up from the hive chapels, mostly just leaders and things like that, to interrogate them to find out more information, see if they're actually Thargoid spies. And then the FIA continues to expand their power, right? The scope of this investigation, which we see a modern equivalent of that in later stories with the what's the name of it? It's the
Proactive
PCB?
Detection Bureau.
Yeah, the Detection Bureau.
Yeah.
Where like the remit of the Detection Bureau just keeps expanding, like what they're doing and how they're doing it. So the FIA does this same thing. They start going after scientists and researchers and people who've been investigating the Thargoid cult and saying that like, no, they're actually not. They're not hostile. They're just here. They don't care. It gets to the point like the violence gets so high, and like the FIA is just nabbing people, left, right, and center, family members, things like that, that they disappear. Like right at the height of the violence, they all kind of go to ground. Nobody knows where. It's this huge mystery for a long time. The FIA is like, well, if you see them coming back, they're trying to reintegrate into society. If you see them, report them. See something, say something, kind of thing. And nobody does because they don't go home. They just off. And right around that same time, they issue out a community goal, which we as the pilots fulfill. They ask us for Thargoid materials for the purpose of worship. And we decide that that's a great idea, and we hand them thousands of tons of random Thargoid engineering materials to do who knows what with. And then they kind of disappear for a little while. There's a journalist called Okonkwo. What's their full name? It is Gethin Okonkwo. And they are the first person that talks about the cult, and then they go missing for a little while. And a few months, about 3 months later, they pop back up and say, oh, hey, by the way, I've actually been deep embedded in the Fire God cult this entire time. Here's a whole bunch of interviews that I did with these people. Here's like all the evidence that you could possibly want for they're not hostile. And they submit it to the FIA. Like less than a week later, the FIA is like, okay, cool, we're done. Lets everybody go. All of that goes away. So right around the same time that we encounter Attain, Prophet and Sanctum stories, which you find out a whole lot more about individual motivations for people joining the cult. And
can I actually just say though that if anyone has not been to Attain 4C, go and see the sites. There are some excellent logs there that you can listen to.
The logs are voice acted. They're well voice acted. The site is gorgeous, especially at night. If you can catch either of those locations at night, they are stunning. You get they're just like there's cities and they're towns and the sea of black with the eerie green Thargoid glow going over it. It's so pretty.
Sure.
Now, before you carry on, bro, saw a couple of questions in chat I wanted to quickly just throw out there. So
sure.
one question was, it's strange that this supposed cult has no public leader. I don't know if you do find that interesting or strange or.
No, I definitely did touch on that at the very beginning, which is in 3304 and 3305, the cult is very disorganized, right? Like different hive chapels, they all kind of operate on their own. Their belief systems are pretty scattered. They're not very organized. In 3307, coming into this, we have Panjabel, right? An entire system is actually taken over by them. It's a theocracy. And they are organized enough to submit another community goal and ask us for help to build not one, but 3 megaships. Like that's an insane amount of organization in such a short amount of time. So something changed. Either a charismatic leader finally rose to the front, or maybe the Thargoids finally got to them.
It's interesting. I mean, another question on that front, kind of. Ellen Jameson, I'll throw this to Jude or Wotherspoon. Is salvation the Far God, says Ellen Jameson? Or could, I guess, even broader, do you think salvation is at all related to the Far God cult?
I wouldn't have thought so, because salvation seems to be very much anti-Thargoid,
right.
With what he's done in Cornsor.
Yeah.
Wiping out the Thargoids. The Far God cult worships the Thargoids. Now that we have these 3 megaships, well, one of them is going to go away and do sort of proselytizing, trying to get more people to join the cult, which is something that the Far Gods never did before. One of them is going to go out and become a sacrifice to the Thargoids, and actually expects to be consumed by them. But it hasn't happened yet. They've gone round the loop twice now, and they've still not been consumed by Thargoids, so they're probably getting a bit bored now. And then the other set of Far God megaship people are wanting to become integrated into the Thargoid species, and they want to become the angels of their Far God. The Far God being a kind of mystical being who exists outside the dimensions that we know, and the angels of the Far God are the Thargoids. And so this is a radical change in the way that the Far Gods work, that they used to be kind of pretty fatalistic and say, well, kind of we'll just hang around here, and the Far Gods sort of will come and destroy us. Now there's a bunch of them that say, hey, we want to become part of this. We want to become integrated with the Fire God. We want to become his angels. We want to be Thargoids. So we've got a bunch of humans in a megaship who want to become Thargoids.
Yeah.
And that's pretty scary. So
Horrifying,
So in answer to the question, no, I think salvation is diametrically opposite to what the Far Gods are doing. I might be wrong, but that's the way I read it.
Yeah, I think so. I know Crow is dying to talk. Jude, have you got anything before we throw it back to Crow?
No, I'm enjoying it. Carry on, Crow.
I'm not dying to talk. I was actually quite enjoying what Wotherspoon was talking about. Yeah, like it really is. It's terrifying to think that there's a group of people who are like, yes, I want to be Thargoids. I want to be part of these ships, especially with the logs from, Fort Ash and what is it? The other one, Oaken Point. Talking about humanity trying to figure out how to make humans work with Thargoid equipment. So,
which we will touch on actually. We will touch on that very soon.
Yeah, it's kind of a horrifying story.
Very horrifying story. Chat, if you've got any questions on this front while we're talking about the Fire God cult, feel free to pop them in. But I guess I'll open it up to the floor. Is there anything here? Have you got any, Crow? Have you got anything that you wanted to discuss about the Fire God cult, that maybe a theory or anything that interests you on that front?
The thing that I really wanted to talk about, and Wotherspoon touched on it, and I touched on it earlier as well, is just the shift in the way that the cult, this organization, works. Like, it starts as sort of almost like a mystery cult, in the Greek sense, higher knowledge, but it's very like scattered, right? The cult of Athena in Delphi versus the cult of Athena in Athens, same idea, different operations, right? This is more cohesive. So something has changed. There's been some kind of reformation in their religion, and they are now actively trying to do things, gain followers, commune with the Thar God, summon the Thar God, which may in itself kind of be indicative of like 3 different ideologies within this new religion, or within this more refined religion. So it'll be interesting to see how this story continues to develop. But at the moment, it's just kind of spinning wheels as they go around in circles saying, "Eat me, eat me, eat me."
Yes, absolutely. The description of the Hive chapels sort of back like 3 or 4 years. 2005. That's really interesting. The chapels were of black coral, dark inside, and Jude laughed when I said this before. It smells of ammonia inside, which is a bit like some phone boxes I know. But yes, I mean it all did seem quite disorganized, and something radically different has happened to the Thargoids. They are an organized religion now. They seem to be the only one of those religions which rose up back in the past. There was the Church of the Eternal Void, and there was the Children of Tothos, who were sort of going to explode a bomb and sort of commit sort of mass suicide. There were all sorts of weird cults.
There were tons of really odd cults that popped up, and a lot of them went away, much like the Cult of the Eternal Void. Although they were declared illegal by the Federation because they kept attacking the Church of the Cult of the Far God, and so they moved from being just a religion to a terrorist organization, and that got them shut down. One of the other ones that was really interesting that popped up around the same time that the Cult of the Far God started showing up was Nova Imperium, which has also been in Galnet recently. This doomsayer cult that's trying to reform the Empire in certain respects. I'm curious to see where some of these storylines actually overlap, or if they're just passing threads, right?
That is something I had not realized, that Nova Imperium was mentioned that far back. As
12 July 3304.
Yeah, and as a kind of outside little cult, a kind of slightly weird offbeat, sort of non-conformist kind of cult. And now, of course, just in the last week or so, Nova Imperium has ceased to be It's become Nova Parisa, and Hadrian Duval has moved off to become part of
their figurehead is gone, but I don't know if that actually means that Nova Imperium is
well, they've changed the
out,
name
right?
to Nova Parisa. So yes, we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Okay, I'm following now.
Anyway, we go off at a tangent. We probably ought to get back on.
So a question from chat, brother Bruce, if you've got any, obviously shout as well. But Chronohawk says, at this point, is there any evidence that the Far God cult has any sway within any of the major powers? Is that, I mean, any evidence of that at this point?
No, everything. So the only way that the story has been told so far, outside of the Attain location and the 2 CGs that have gone on with it, has all been through Galnet. Right? We haven't actually seen any of this in the game so far.
Yeah.
So unless something pops up and says, "Hey, this person starts acting kind of fun. It's been acting kind of funny." There's really nothing to suggest that that's the case. It's possible that you could link that to Jasmina Halsey, which is the only person I can think of that's had gone through something and come back kind of off, right? And she's also popped up recently in the story again. Although it was her decrying her previous story and saying this is a response to trauma, this didn't actually happen, etc.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, if anybody does go to Attain 4C and listen to the logs there, it's okay. Kiona O'Connor was rescued. Okay. So
yes.
When you hear that log,
she was rescued.
She was rescued. Yeah. Right. That was Fire Gods.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, we can move on.
So, is there anything else in chat?
Unless anyone, Jude or Crow, any final words on?
No, like I said, I was trying to be respectful of the time so that we could continue on. So
yeah, it's nice.
It's so hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very difficult.
It is.
Jude?
It really is.
Anything, Jude?
Oh no, I'm all right.
Yeah, you're happy with all the contributions that have been made. You're everything's been told as is. Do you agree with it all? Do you don't think anything is that they've said is wrong from Crow or
I like the
from
story
Wotherspoon?
of the Far Gods. I find them charming. There's a real that doom cult type thing. The willing kind of sacrifice. It's a really good sci-fi trope. I really enjoy that one. It reminds me of all those old books from the olden days. Can't find one of them. Anyway, yeah, no, but yeah, it's layers and layers of memories of different books for me. I really like that stuff.
Nice, good.
But yeah, that's in no way useful to anyone. But
that's all useful. Bruce, should we crack on? Should we move on to the next topic?
Yes, we should. I'm 50-50 about asking a question, but I realise time is short, and also I don't want to accidentally say anything or spoil anything I shouldn't.
I mean, that's up to you, but we actually got 2 minutes until I scheduled us to go on to Hyford's Cache, so you're welcome.
I suggest we do move on to Hyford's Cache, but I will leave a sort of hypothetical question for people to mull over instead, then, rather than for us to discuss.
Okay.
So, yeah, the Far God cult are a very interesting and mysterious and strange bunch. They are sort of devoutly pro-Thargoid and very devoted to them. Obviously, Wotherspoon very astutely replied to the suggestion that salvation might be tied to them in some way by saying, actually, they seem diametrically opposed. I suppose my question for mulling over is, when you do have cultists who are so devoted and dedicated to something like that, it leaves them vulnerable and open to certain suggestions or ideas. So the question is it possible that they've been taken advantage of in some way because of these vulnerabilities? Anyway, let's move on to the Hyford's Cache.
Just drop
Well,
that
yes,
ball.
it is
All
obvious
right, we're
now.
gonna move on
Now
now.
you've said that.
Jeez.
Right, so Hyford's Cache. So
could it
Hyford's
be?
Cache is a long running story, I guess is fair to say. So we'll pass over to Wotherspoon. Can you give us, for someone who hasn't heard anything about Hyford's Cache, we've got I reckon we've got another 10 minutes or so. Talk us through Hyford's Cache. If anyone wants to jump in, feel free.
10 minutes, and it's dead easy, isn't it? It's such a concise story.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so if we cast our minds back sort of to 3303, the beginning of 3303, 3303, yes, beginning of 3303, we began to see sort of evidence of Thargoids, but it was things like unknown artifacts and things like that. So things that weren't conclusively Thargoid, but there was stuff happening there. And one of the things that happened in the Thargoid was there was this mysterious bunch of people that we came across in several cases called the Black Flight. And the Black Flight appeared to be trying to shut down various listening posts that were finding evidence that Thargoids were beginning to encroach on the Pleiades and were beginning to come in. At this time, we as pilots in the galaxy didn't know that the Thargoids were coming back. We had suspicions, but there was nothing in the history books. There was nothing we could look at. And it was almost like somebody had rewritten the history books and taken all the information about Thargoids out. And yet we kept seeing these little bits of evidence. There were a couple of survey vessels, Pandora and Victoria's Song. There was communications hub Zeta 12 in Electra. There was a number of sites that were that left logs to show that some bunch of people had come and sort of wiped them out. And then in Kailano, we discovered relay station PSJ-17.
17, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I've got it written down because I couldn't remember the details. And that mentions that this was the kind of command center, but it wasn't the complete command center. There was another one called Overlook somewhere. And that perhaps they would sort of take some prisoners from these listening stations and take them to Overlook for questioning. So that was kind of interesting, and particularly they mentioned that there was zero tolerance for allowing this information to get into the public eye. That's exactly what they said. So that's 4 years ago, and one of the other things that we found 4 years ago was a trail of a Commander Hyford who left a couple of listening posts, or left messages on a couple of listening posts, that he'd gone out to Colonia and that he was running away from the Black Flight. And then when we get to Colonia, there was sort of a data cache, and it was dead, and there was nothing there. It was a dead end. We didn't know what to do with this. And then sort of in the middle of this year, 4 years later, that data cache came to life, and it said, "Hey guys, I was running away from the Black Flight. I did things that were really terrible. Commander Hyford did things that were really terrible, and I can't forgive myself for what I've done." And it told us where to go. And really annoyingly, because of course we were in Colonia, the place that it told us to go was the other side of the bubble, out towards the rim, out in the kind of Orion sector, that kind of area. And so we all sort of dashed back there. And what we discovered was actually two bases. The first one we found, which is the further out one, is called Oaken Point, and that is in HIP 26176. And if you go out there, you can listen to the logs that are there. What was happening there was some experiments going on. It appears to be Azimuth, the same people that we know from the Adamastor and the Hesperus and the Proteus, who discovered that they could make weapons using Guardian technology 200 years ago. Yeah, just 4 years ago now. So we've come forward sort of like quite a long way. Come forward nearly 2 centuries. Just 4 years ago, they were making attempts, or they were attempting to take a Thargoid scout and put a person inside it and get that person to control it. But they were doing it in a really horrible way. What they were doing was kind of putting probes into the human subjects' heads, and most of the subjects just sort of died. And kind of, well, that's okay. We're scientists. We'll just put another human in and we'll keep going. Eventually, the Thargoid scout ran out of power, and they had to go and try and find another one. So they went off sort of to a place called HIP 22460, And that's where we find the Overlook, which is the Black Flight's megaship. It's in that system. It is permit locked, but if you follow the trail of beacons back from Oaken Point, you come to a place where you can get an unlock to that permit. So once you then get to HIP 22460, we find a surface base called Fort Ash. And that's where they were trying to capture another Thargoid scout, so they could continue their experiments with trying to create this hybrid sort of human Thargoid scout creature. What happened, unfortunately for them, is that the number of Thargoids that arrived in the Pleiades and the sort of Thargoids that arrived in the Pleiades became so much. They were experimenting on scouts, but interceptors, Thargoid interceptors, started arriving, the Cyclops, and they became so prominent in the Pleiades that the Azimuth and the Black Flight were actually called out, because they said, look, there's whoever it was that was in control of them, the witch that they describe, said, kind of like, there's no way we can keep this secret anymore. Retreat, and we'll continue our experiment somewhere else. And that's a bit that we don't know what happened, but we do know that 4 years ago they were experimenting on putting people inside Thargoid scouts, which possibly creates some hope for us perhaps getting to Thargoid scouts in the future, who knows. And they sound like they were a pretty nasty bunch, and if they were around 4 years ago, the chances are they're still around now. So that's the kind of interesting bit. So that's Hyford's cache in a nutshell, as far as I can do it.
Yeah.
We do
Oh,
learn
yeah,
something
and the guy in
interesting
charge
about...
is called Thomas Dawn. Sorry.
Yes.
Carry on.
Fine. We do learn something else interesting about Azimuth in that storyline, which is we learn what their purpose is. And their purpose is to research, to eliminate the Thargoids by removing the Thargoids' one advantage, which is their technology.
Mm-hmm.
So they are an R&D organization who are trying to understand Thargoid technology so that we can eliminate, not defeat, eliminate the Thargoids.
Yes.
Sound familiar?
Yes, eliminate the Thargoids and then have this massive sort of arsenal of weaponry, which they could potentially then turn on anybody. They could effectively become the guardians or the rulers of the galaxy, which is kind of a bit scary. They don't sound particularly friendly bunch, and whether or not they have any relation to all the Guardian weaponry development that Salvation's been doing, that's the question that we don't have at the moment. Are they two competing sort of researchers, one set sort of concentrating on the Thargoids, the other set concentrating on the Guardians, or is there some overlap? Are they happy to just sort of mix and match from the two different technologies and perhaps create bigger, more powerful weapons?
Let's take that question then. Jude, let's ask you this question. Do you think that these two stories of what's happening now with Salvation and the sort of new anti-Xeno weaponry and what happened in Cornsar, what do you think? Do you think this is potentially linked to the things that have gone on in Hyford's cache and that whole storyline, or is this completely separate in your mind?
Sorry, I'm receiving messages on Discord. Anyway, sorry.
Do you feel like Hyford's cache and that story is somehow linked to what's happening right now with Salvation?
Yeah, thank you.
That's all right.
I don't think so. I think potentially Salvation has got his own agenda. We're not entirely certain that Salvation isn't some splinter cell of Aegis with a kind of an axe to grind, who is based in the human side of things rather than the creepy, scary Inrari side of things. They're not the Inra, sorry, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You may not know what I mean.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
But,
to be fair,
but
point.
he may not be from sinister beginnings. He may actually just be a dissatisfied member of Aegis. Or a department. It may just be the name of a department of Aegis who've splintered away and decided to work against Aegis because they were dissatisfied with what the progress or the direction that Aegis took.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
that's possible. I mean, any thoughts on that? Anyone agree or disagree with that from Jude?
No, it's a good thought, and I've definitely thought along the same lines. It makes, from a human motivation, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, yeah. But then sort of Albertezro resigning from... I mean, Albertezro got appointed to Aegis round about the same time that the Azimuth operation got wound up. So there's all sorts of potentials that, Salvation could be something to do with Aegis, and Albertezro, who's part of Aegis, could be something to do with Azimuth. There's so many possibilities for how this could all be mixed up together. The people who are creating this story for us are really tying us in knots and making it really hard for us to guess where it's going to go next, which is really exciting.
It's interesting because great name, I guess, in chat. But Storage says, y'all got to be careful. They're going to have to rewrite stuff. Now, basically, you'll know that me and Bruce will not respond. We won't really respond differently to any of these theories. So it's highly, one of the theories that have been mentioned in the past 3 of these narrative streams might be correct. Maybe it's not. We're not going to change things. We'll just see how it ends up, right, Bruce? We got to keep our game faces through these streams.
Yeah, it's probably one of the hardest parts for us is trying to enjoy the conversation, but react equally to as many of the theories as possible.
Just nod and smile.
Lots of nodding and smiling. Yeah.
Right, so
we've
got...
it's a fair point about Salvation is there are so many potential incentives or motivations that they might be responding to. I guess something to consider is maybe the way they choose to communicate and operate, and their methodology might somehow indicate the motivation. If you could infer sort of backwards, perhaps that's a thread to pull on that might provoke some clues or ideas.
Thinking back on the communication, they definitely strike me as an egomaniac, right? I am the only solution. I am, I am the way. This almost messianic complex.
Yeah, just
right?
The word salvation. I mean, that's
the name is telling. Yeah.
So
it's true. We've got about 3 or 4. Well, let's push it. We've got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything on Hyford's cache that we wanted to bring up before we sort of wrap up today's show, which has gone by in a breeze?
They always do, don't they?
Yeah.
I don't think so. There's a lot of people who talk about D2, the test subject, the one who survived from the experiments at Oaken Point, being something special. I really don't think that. As far as I can see, D2 is a really empathetic character. We see her escape, and in fact, the reason that Hyford is chased across the galaxy is because Azimuth suspect that he might have helped her to escape, which turns out, I think, not to be true. But we can actually follow her on the trail between Oaken Point and Fort Ash, and as far as we can tell, she escapes and lives happily ever after.
We hope.
We hope, yes, and that's where I'd like to see that end. But who knows? She may turn up again. That's the lovely thing about being in the middle of history, that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. If you're reading the history books and looking backwards, you can see where everything fits in. We're in the middle of it. We don't know what's happening in the future, which is the really exciting bit about all of this.
I mean, we can make predictions, right, based on the way that the story has been written so far, right? As opposed to like looking at it as history. If you look at it as story and narrative, which is my shtick, there's a very distinct storytelling style, and you can use that storytelling style to say, okay, here's what's going to happen, or here's like an approximation. You may not get all the fine details right, but you can get kind of the gross bits together.
Okay.
Which is fun, right?
The theorizing, the tin foil.
The tin foil, yes.
In all its glory. Yeah, I mean, it's always we love these streams, and it's great because we know that there is more narrative to come, right, Bruce? Like, we're not close to the end of this, really, are we?
There's a lot more to come. Yeah.
2 years of narrative, that's what we were promised.
Right.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll be a rolling 2 years, and you know, there's a reasonable likelihood that there'll be some good payoffs for us along the way. There'll be the weapons that Salvation is providing to us. There'll be more stuff like that as we go along the way. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on it, not just for the storyline, but also for how it changes the way we can play in the game.
Indeed.
I imagine some new mechanics may also be introduced as part of this the story.
Sure.
Me and Bruce with our straight faces. You'll get nothing. You'll get nothing. Right. So that brings us to the end of our allotted time. Somehow it's crazy as always. So before we go, we've got way more things that we can talk about in another one of these streams, chat. So don't worry, we'll do another one. We can talk about the Scrivener Clan Dredger in its entirety. We can talk way more about Salvation and that whole situation. And there's loads of other parts of Elite that we can also talk about. So we will keep doing these shows. I know a lot of you say we should do 2-hour shows. Maybe we'll think about doing that in the future as well. Okay, so let's wrap up then. So what I want to do is go around to each of our guests, and if you could tell us, if you got anything you want to plug, again, tell us where we can find you. So I'll start with Grinning Crow. Obviously, thank you for coming on, Crow, as always. Where can we find you? Anything to plug?
Thank you guys for having me. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Grinning_Crow. You can find me on Twitch, Grinning_Crow. I'll actually be live tonight at 2000 UTC.
That's right now. So
no, that's not right now. Then I'll be
You are live.
I'm really bad at UTC time.
He's not
we'll
making
actually be doing more for our God stuff.
Though.
Nice.
I'm also doing a charity stream on November the 11th. It's for a veterans charity organization called Stack Up. So if you all want to win some fun prizes and talk about lore and do Elite Dangerous stuff, you can find me there as well. I think that one's actually at 1800 UTC.
Nice.
2200. Thank you, Mr. Bishbosh. 2200 is when I go live.
2200 UTC. Okay, cool.
Yes.
And Jude, do you want to, again, obviously the community knows you from your incredible artwork as well as everything on Galnet. You give us a rundown, Jude. Everything you do within Elite. Give us it.
Oh, I put pictures on Twitter.
Right, they do very well though. They're very well made.
I draw pictures. I draw loads of pictures. Basically, the thing is, if anyone wants a picture and they are willing to give me the money to post it to them, I will draw that picture.
That's a bold ask, Jude. There are hundreds of people in this chat. There are hundreds of people in this chat.
Before yeah, no, it doesn't matter. I've always got about half a dozen more than half a dozen in a backlog. No one will get it this year anyway, because I'm terrible at deadlines. Doesn't matter. But yeah, no, I tend to draw people's screenshots, and I help out on Galnet.
You do help out on Galnet News Digest, but I mean, Pete, Wotherspoon, is that fair? Is that a fair thing to say that Jude helps out? Like, tell us about Galnet News Digest, Wotherspoon.
It's not always helpful.
Not always helpful, no, that's right. So generally speaking, I'd be better off doing it myself, to be honest.
With less photobombing, to be fair.
That's right.
But conversely, fewer thumbnails, so...
That's right, yeah. So Jude does the thumbnails as well as the voices, and does some of the videos. And she also has her own YouTube channel, which is it just...
And I wear the remlocks when I'm required to.
Nice.
I wear a pumpkin. I bought a pumpkin because you said get a pumpkin. I bought a pumpkin, not that pumpkin, not this one. A pumpkin in game because you wanted me to look like.
We have a pumpkin, yes.
Yeah.
We had to have a pumpkin in one of our videos. Yes, indeed. So yes. So what's your YouTube?
I've got a YouTube. It's called BeetleJude.
It's called BeetleJude, where you can see BeetleJude drawing the pictures.
Yeah.
Indeed.
What's your YouTube?
Highly recommend. Yeah, what's your YouTube, Wotherspoon?
Okay, we have Galnet News Digest. I guess all one word is the name of the user. So Galnet News Digest on YouTube. It's also available if you search for Galnet space News space Digest as a podcast, and it's on things like Spotify and whatever. I've also been asked to mention the podcasts that I'm involved in. So 11 p.m. Central Time, there's the Guard Frequency podcast on Fridays. That's Fridays, 11 p.m. American time, which is this week. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, Saturday, UK time, and the week after it'll be 5 o'clock. So this is the Guard Frequency podcast, which is fabulous, and I do the editing for that or some of the editing for that. Then we've also got Lave Radio on Tuesdays at 8:30 UK time, and Hutton Orbital Truckers is on Thursdays after the Thursday Elite stream, and that's coming on in about 20 minutes on Hutton Orbital Truckers. And I have a video coming out at 9 p.m, which will be the Halloween story. So if anybody wants to watch that on my YouTube channel, they are very welcome so to do. And it's not too scary, but it is voice acted, which is kind of cool. So
yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah,
cool. So yeah, thanks as always for all of our guests for coming on. Thank you everyone in chat. Bruce, any final words on today's events?
Not much to add really, other than to say thank you once again to each of our esteemed guests for joining us. This has been excellent, and hopefully you'd be up for another one of these in the future as the narrative evolves.
Yes,
Anytime.
definitely. Yeah, we did our very best to finish on time. So
Yeah, we could talk about this kind of stuff literally for probably a 24-hour stream if we wanted to put together a lot. So there'll be way more chat. As long as you want them chat, we'll keep doing them, and it seems like you like them, so yeah, we'll keep doing them. Okay, so I'll wrap up the stream there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be back on what day is it? Yeah, we're back on Tuesday with another stream as always. So keep an eye out on Monday for the schedule for that. So yeah, please stick around while we find someone to raid, and as always, please be kind, as we expect of everyone in the community, to the person that we do raid. And yeah, we'll be back on Tuesday. So until then, 07 Commanders.
07 everyone.